Before we get into this video, I would like to thank my patrons, Harpy, Corporal Hot Pockets, and Salvatore Di Pietro. The three of you make this channel possible, and you guys are awesome. Hi! Originally, I was going to just keep to the basics of Warhammer lore, as I will admit. I myself am still reading through a lot of the various books of Warhammer 40k, of which there's a lot of, so please understand. But I was inspired by various Warhammer YouTubers and their takes on the Emperor, and I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna weigh in on a rather heavy topic in the Warhammer lore community myself, which is basically the rise of humanity, the fall of humanity, and its subsequent rise in quotation marks, and really just what are the Emperor's intentions for humanity, and have those intentions been undone, or are they just part of his plan? I don't cover everything, I think, here, but again, this is just generally my take on things, because at the end of the day, when it comes to the Emperor, it's really subjective, right? Aside from the things that are concrete, that we know are there, the Emperor is just a deliberately mysterious character, and Warhammer 40,000 is one of those things where, well, headcanon does matter, because, well, you know, gotta sell those minis. I don't know why I waved a mini in front of my computer. I have a Dreadnought mini that I just got that I am super proud of, and I don't know why I waved it in front of the screen when you can't see it, but I digress. I'm just gonna get the usual YouTube stuff over with. I got, you know, please like, subscribe, comment. It really helps me out. You know what? Actually, let's make this. I say this every time to myself, but I want this to be my most interacted with video, because I want to see what happens. I really want to see what happens. I really want to see how much interaction changes the video. And of course, I have a link tree, takes you to my other channels, Patreon, Discord, other channels, excuse me, Patreon, Discord. All right, let's just get right into it, because I am super excited to cover this topic. When talking about the Emperor of Mankind, almost immediately we run into issues regarding validity. Firstly, the truth is, as much as we know about the Emperor, there is just as much and arguably more that we don't know. His motives, incentives, rationale, and history are all fiercely debated, and every time one theory is even nodded towards in canon, it's a big thing. But then there are just as many nods or mentions to multiple other theories that conflict with the theory that's just been nodded to. This is just the nature of Warhammer 40,000. Some of the things we are trying to answer come from records that are thousands of years old, from eras that are long forgotten. The Emperor's origins start before history was even properly recorded, meaning that the only one who can confirm his own origins is the Emperor, who's frankly not a reliable source for reasons I'll get into later. Then we have to recall that 40k is set in Millennium 41, just entering Millennium 42. In the year 2023, you and I are living in the third millennium, meaning that, at the current time, Warhammer 40k is set 38 to 39,000 years in the future. Now, this is just gibberish to you. At the end of the day, the human mind is not able to truly comprehend this scale of time. Sure, we can say, yep, okay, 1 year is 365 days, and just times that by 40,000. Makes sense. But we don't actually grasp the scale of that. So, for reference, as of November 2022, the First World War ended 104 years ago. The American Civil War, because I'm using that as an example since most of my audience is American, it ended 157 years ago. On this scale of time, neither of those wars, they're a blip on the radar, yet multiple generations have been born and moved on. There are no veterans from either war anymore, and the ones old enough to recount that time are few and far between. As of 2014, only 5 living individuals were confirmed to have been born in the 19th century, and when I say the 19th century, I mean like the 1890s, the late 1890s. We live in the 21st century. For that matter, the first steam-powered locomotion was built in 1804. I was born in 2004, 200 years after. Today we live in an era that would be completely alien to the humans of the first locomotion, or the humans that made the first locomotion, excuse me. Now, let's expand a little. The sacking of Rome occurred in the year 410 CE, in the first millennium. That was only 1600 years ago, and yet that is considered by us to be ancient history, and records from that time are plentiful, but lacking in detail, and there are many things that will just remain lost to history. Some of it is deliberately destroyed, damnatio memoriae, who knows how much is just gone because people wanted to leave it buried. All the people, pets, aristocrats, lost to history, with only a select number of notable individuals being remembered to this day. Let's go before that, to ancient Egypt. Look at Cleopatra VII. She's a household name for anyone who studies history. We all study her in school. Even though we remember her name, much of what we know about her comes down to rumors, speculation, and legends. A mythos. There's not any degree of certainty, and she lived 2,050 years ago. One of the possibly oldest recorded human cities was that of Eridu, part of the ancient Sumerian civilization. This city was settled more than 7,000 years ago. Presumably it would have thrived. It had its own social structure and societal standards. It had a culture. People lived there. Languages, religious beliefs, foods, a form of government, something akin to a precursor to a legal code, because you know Hammurabi's code, port, markets, and more. Today, it is nothing more than a series of mounds, less than 10 in number, that one would mistake for a weird collection of rocks from a distance. In other words, by 40K standards, we are literally at the very beginning of human history, and the Emperor's life dates back farther than that. And then, of course, going back to 40K lore, the galaxy has seen crisis after crisis after crisis, which led to a great loss of knowledge that was never recovered. Making matters worse is the state of the galaxy in the 41st millennium, which is dominated by a society that revolves around the suppression of information and knowledge, and the replacement of facts with fiction favorable to their agenda. Once again, damnatio memoriae. What is real and what is just propaganda can be uncertain at times, and that is not accounting for the fact that what is fact may just be theories crafted from a sliver of information recovered from times long past. And as unbelievable as it may seem that it is possible to lose such a wealth of knowledge almost entirely, this has happened before, and can happen again in real life. You and I are spoiled by the digital age, in which we can pull out our cell phone or hop on a laptop to search for something online. All of the collective knowledge of humanity is stored in a single device carried in your pocket that is as powerful as a supercomputer a few decades ago. It is quite an achievement. But that also leaves us vulnerable. In an era where written documents are seen as auxiliary rather than primary, all it takes is a solar storm of sufficient magnitude to unravel all of developed society. Don't believe that such a thing could happen? Just look at the Carrington event, which thankfully occurred before electricity was a staple part of life. Were our interconnected systems to fail, our economies would grind to a halt, our knowledge would be, well, a lot of it would be lost. Commerce would be disrupted, decades of knowledge would be erased or relegated to a select few documents that are only accessible to the fortunate, and, well, I guess libraries would be back in style. Common goods would also just disappear. Luxuries would vanish. One major disruption could make a society fall apart. Humanity has gone through complete and total collapses in 40K, and at one point it lost the ability to travel between stars, which reduced many worlds, Terra included, into a feudal state with backwards technology being used by techno-barbarians. The point is, who the Emperor is, how he came to be, our history, what the Emperor's motivations are, how he became as powerful as he did, why we fell. None of it is known with any degree of certainty, even when discussing the events of, say, the Horus Heresy during Warhammer 30K, which literally has books upon books set in them. We cannot confirm a huge amount of the details. So, yeah, please understand that before we get into the Emperor, who he is, and why he's an enigma. Now, with that in mind, the Emperor of Mankind, also known as the Anathema to the Chaos Gods, was and still is the most powerful human psyker in existence, though there are some debates as to whether or not he was truly a psyker or something else entirely. We just don't know. If you're wondering what a psyker is, we'll get to that in a minute. It is also mentioned that he is a perpetual, but that in of itself is also questionable. He emerged during Terra's ancient past when humans were still mastering fire. Whether he was created by the collective deaths of 1,000 shamans, was the product of an old one, or something else, well, once again, we just don't know. While you and I know him as the Emperor, he was once called by a different name, which has been lost to history. He kept to the shadows for much of humanity's development, influencing us. Some believe he was busy protecting us from cosmic entities. Others believe he was just generally doing his best to nudge us along in the proper direction. Whatever the case may be, we know that the Emperor was doing something during this time. There's speculation and reason to believe that he has played a role in early human history. However, over time, humanity would grow in power. Technology would advance, artificial intelligence would become a staple part of society. Eventually, navigators would emerge, and humanity spread across the stars. It is generally well known that by the time of 40K, humanity is a far cry from what it once was. And that is true. Humanity's Golden Age, also known to the Imperium as the Dark Age of Technology, elevated our species to incredible heights, so much so that other races actively avoided conflict with us because we had just become so dominant. It's hard to emphasize just how powerful we were because how can I? That would be like trying to explain the 21st century to a caveman with no concepts of the various technologies and societal standards you and I consider to be the norm. This isn't to insult your intelligence or my own, it's just difficult to emphasize the scale of our species during the Dark Age of Technology because the human mind just doesn't understand the size of something beyond the house it resides in. Comprehending distance on our own planet is a struggle, which is why we consistently require tools such as maps and GPS to efficiently navigate. Even when someone memorizes a region or county and can generally grasp how far point A is from point B, that same individual will be hard-pressed to understand the size and scope of the ocean other than it's big. And with the size and scope of humanity in the Dark Age of Technology, we are talking about some truly galactic proportions. Unfortunately, a string of events would lead to our downfall. Firstly, let's just get the elephant out of the room. Not much is known about the men of gold, stone, and iron, but the third group is what would set off a string of events that would more or less bring about our doom. Artificially intelligent machines, the men of iron specifically, for some reason or another elected to revolt against humanity. This is called the cybernetic revolt. Why this occurred, it's not really known, as usual. It is my personal belief, and again, this is just my personal theory, that as human society became so reliant on AI, we as a species would actually lose common skills and capabilities as the machine could just do it for us. Presumably these machines that could think and feel for themselves would come to a conclusion that humanity is simply a parasite, no longer needed in the equation. They could likely serve their functions and further expand the power of the civilization they were a part of without humanity, because after all, we were no longer contributing to the bigger picture to a significant degree, and so they tried to simply get rid of us. Now, here's the thing. If we were truly fully reliant on AI, then the Men of Iron would have destroyed us, right? We wouldn't have been able to fight back, nor could we have ever recovered. So it may be possible that humanity retained the ability to perform its own functions, but was just completely inefficient and outmatched when compared to its machine counterparts. We know there was a galactic coalition of sorts, not all of which was made up of humanity. It may very well be that not all AI turned against us, and of course it's very likely that the Xenos did help us. These factors may have been what saved us, and ultimately we would triumph, but this galaxy-spanning war did devastate everything. Weapons of truly terrifying proportions were fielded on both sides that would do irreparable damage to the galaxy. Now, while the very ancient War in Heaven, that we will cover another day, did far more damage to the galaxy and universe, like an indescribably larger amount of damage, I would personally consider this cybernetic revolt to be humanity's own equivalent of the War in Heaven. Of course, we really just don't know at the end of the day. Welcome to Warhammer 40,000. Today's featured meal is the Ambiguity Special, which includes the Vague Burger, a side of curly time caps, a soft drink of half-truth soda, and for dessert, a hot slice of Forgotten Berry Pie. So, by this point, human society was damaged beyond repair, extremely weakened, and the galaxy was in a very rough state. At the same time, human psychers had emerged. So, now, what is a psyker? I've mentioned them already. A psyker is an individual who possesses some degree of psychic ability in the 40K galaxy. These individuals draw their power from the immaterium and could, well, mold that into reality, as they have some form of connection to the warp. It is not universally agreed upon as to where psychers come from, but many will agree that as a species evolves, it naturally develops psychic capabilities. This is something alluded to multiple times in universe and can be supported by speculation, provided the speculation is made clear to be just that, speculation. My favorite instance of psychers being discussed as a possible natural course of evolution comes from my favorite collection of stories, Sisters of Battle, the Omnibus. Look, if I have the opportunity to geek out about the Sisters of Battle, I'm going to fucking take it. Okay? Don't judge me. Don't judge me. You're judging me. I know you're judging me. No. Bad. No judgment. This is a judgment-free channel. Okay? Okay? Alright. In one of the stories, a group of battle sisters and a hospitalier who had been pursuing a psyker by the name of Vaughn managed to capture their target. However, before they can execute him on the spot for all the pain he's caused them, on top of the fact that he's a psyker, Vaughn makes the plea for his life. Not out of fear, but out of a gamble. The man explains that the reason he has returned to this planet, the reason he has caused such a ruckus, was to get within reach of his target, a powerful deacon who had allegedly experimented on him from an early age. At first, the women are furious that he would even imply that such a holy official could be so heretical, but then they recollected some previous events that really didn't add up. As an example, when the Hospitaller Verity had attempted to find records pertaining to this particular psyker, someone of significant power had sent an assassin to kill her. Coupling that with other strange occurrences, the group decides, miraculously, to humor Vaughn, who leads them to a hidden facility. Here, the deacon's heresy was on full display. He had an entire operation dedicated to the learning of psychic powers, and he even had some sort of less advanced version of the Golden Throne constructed. Vaughn, of course, betrays the Sororitas and escapes, allowing them to be captured. The deacon in question then decides to explain himself. He claims that he is attempting to continue the work of the Emperor of Mankind, that for a long time now he has worked hard to find fragments of ancient data that confirmed his and supposedly the Emperor's suspicions, that humans are slowly evolving to become psychically linked with the warp. What you do not know, what is recorded only in the most secret and arcane places, is the nature of the great work that he was about when Horus's perfidy drew him away. I have dedicated my life to that knowledge. I have found scraps of datum from across the galaxy, collated and sifted them, and drawn together a piecemeal vision of what I believe to be the Emperor's lost labor. That is what I continue here, his works. The sisters are horrified and disgusted with the man before them, refusing to believe a word of what he says, so he carries on. With each passing century, more and more psychers are born within the Imperium, far more than the Adeptus Ministorum will admit to. These are not mutant throwbacks, they are the hand of human evolution struggling to exert itself. The fools of the Ordo Malleus try to stem the tide, but they are blind to the truth. The progression of mankind's psychic potential is inevitable, that it was the will of the Emperor to shepherd it, not destroy it. Don't you see, he knew that one day all mankind would develop the power of the mind. It is our destiny. Think of it. Imagine a time when every man is a god himself, a subject in an imperium that spans the universe. Can you even begin to comprehend the glory of it? If the psyker is such a canker, then why do we rely on them to light the way for our starships, to carry our communications, to fight on our battlefields? Where is your answer to that dichotomy? The empire of man would be in ruins without their kind, and if we could become them, we would know no boundaries. Though we shall return to this point later, as we need to get back to the history at hand. Psychers are important, but they also have ties to the Immaterium. This makes them vulnerable to the machinations of malicious warp spawn. Demons would possess psychers or use them as a means to wreak havoc in our realm. This basically meant that whether or not your planet was ransacked by demons immediately depended on whether or not it hunted psychers down like witches or tolerated them in the name of science. However, even if you lived on a world fortunate enough to avoid the fate of more tolerant societies, this didn't guarantee your safety. Around this time, the Eldari really ramped up large group activities involving murder and happy fun feel good down below in the groin times. Like, a lot. And here we get into Slaanesh. See, the warp is influenced heavily by the emotions and actions of the galaxy. Violence and intense emotional outcries tend to be what is most favored by chaos. Well, why is that? Well, think about it like this. Take the orcs. For all intents and purposes, most, if not all, of what they use shouldn't work. It's literally just scrap and junk welded and sometimes taped together. But this is where the biggest strength of the orcs comes into play. their numbers. The warp is driven by all the thoughts, emotions, and actions of every living creature, etc. So, say an orc tapes a pipe to a trigger and calls it a shoota to deal with the oobies. The orcs around him thinks he has a functioning weapon, and they all think that all their equipment works and is suitable for battle. There's just so many orcs that firmly believe in their own technology that it creates let's call it a bubble of thought in the warp. It's localized, and it's just so many orcs keeping it alive. Well, yep, the warp reacts accordingly, and that shoota works. That is the key to influencing the warp. Something incredibly intense or excessive will get things going. So in the Eldar's case, they are collectively so obsessed with pleasure, so obsessed with going further and further with their perversions and violence, be it self-inflicted or onto others, that the warp began to grow turbulent. And unlike the orcs, which are best localized with their was, why did I do that? The Eldar were so vast and powerful that this pretty much became a galaxy-wide phenomenon. This would ultimately culminate in Slaanesh being born or awakened, but that is a story for another time. During the process of this murderous, space elf fun time, the warp became so turbulent that interstellar travel became impossible. Remember how I mentioned that if our interconnected global economy broke down, we'd be screwed? Now imagine that on a galactic scale. Humanity effectively lost the ability to travel and communicate with its vast civilization, and this was the nail in the coffin. Had the cybernetic revolt not occurred, it is possible that pieces of our society would have remained intact, but we were just so devastated that we simply fell apart. Now, a select few worlds did actually manage by themselves okay, some even thrived, but the vast majority, Terra included, fell hard. Here's the thing, when a society becomes intertwined with foreign regions, therefore building a reliance on it, if the two regions are cut off from one another, the reliant one is going to suffer. If, say, an agricultural world was exporting to an urban world with little to no capacity to feed itself, then that urban world needs the agri-world to survive, lest its populace starve. The urban world can then become a hub of commerce, governance, and education, thus developing new technologies, medicines, and furthering the knowledge of the next generation, which can then contribute to the society's growth. Without even getting into it being a seat of governing power, this urban world also becomes the economic heart of society as it imports and exports various goods, stimulating the market. The knowledge developed by the urban world is then transferred over to an industrial world, which can manufacture and export these new developments, all while making the necessary components to maintain the technologies used by both the agri-world and urban planet. If the agri-world is for some reason cut off from the other two, both the industrial and urban worlds starve, and their ability to function breaks down as society is unable to function when everybody is fighting over the bare necessities. Maybe certain plants are also needed to make specific medicines or good, meaning that those are also gone. If the industrial world goes, the ability to manufacture and maintain goes with it, and society decays as a result. If the urban world is gone, trade, commerce, governance, or education, and communication goes with it. All the worlds need each other to function, some more than others, so now imagine this, but much, much more complex on a galactic scale, and you see the issue. Planets like Terra or Old Earth can't sustain themselves, as all of their natural features are either useless or gone, replaced by utterly massive and sprawling urban centers. Now we know some semblance of food production and resources remained, as Earth didn't die off completely, but it was so minuscule to such a degree that the vast majority of the population died off. The government failed as it no longer had the resources to maintain order, and various barbaric groups fought over the scraps. This was the beginning of the Age of Strife, or the Old Night. Why is the Dark Age of Technology called the Dark Age of Technology when it was our Golden Age? This is a question I see asked about a lot. It's been covered by many channels, and I found myself asking this for a long time. And the answer, at least in my opinion, is surprisingly straightforward, at least in my opinion. The answer is that trauma runs deep. Humanity, after its fall from grace, after the devastation of the cybernetic revolt and desperation brought on by the Age of Strife, became a truly traumatized, paranoid species, afraid of technology, afraid of psychers, afraid of the stars, afraid of the warp, afraid of each other. Fear became our driving factor. We looked at our golden age, our time in the sun, and instead of the good times, all we could do was recall our naivety, our foolishness, our hubris in the belief of our guaranteed, in quotation marks, dominance, our idiotic relinquishing of life to machinery, and said, no, No, that was a horrible time. That was a dark age of technology, as we had not learned our lesson. Though it could be argued that the definitions vary. As an example, the Mechanicus relies on the discovery of STCs, standard template constructs, which were easily humanity's greatest achievements, as they contained the sum total knowledge of everything ever available to our species. Nowadays, STCs are few and far between, and so the Mechanicus searches for them and their lost knowledge constantly. The lack of knowledge of our history and technology can be considered a reasoning for the name, the Dark Age of Technology. It is a dark spot in our history which no light can illuminate, or perhaps it is a willing blindness. Personally, I believe it is a combination of the three. Whatever the case may be, the truest of Dark Ages for humanity was the Age of Strife, also known as the Old Night, which lasted from M25 to M30. This was humanity at its weakest, and that was when the individual we know as the Emperor of Mankind came into play. He led a great series of wars to unify Terra, where he would work to consolidate his power and craft his plans alongside fellow perpetuals and companions such as Malcador and Urda. Originally, the Emperor made use of recruited techno-barbarians to constitute his army, giving them augmentations and armor to make them into massive superhuman units, the Thunder Warriors. However, when the Unification Wars concluded, the Emperor betrayed these warriors and proceeded to have most, if not all of them, eradicated in secret. This is when we started seeing the first Astartes, or Space Marines, appear. Around this time, the Primarchs were also created. The Primarchs were 20 male sons created by the Emperor. Yes, created. The Emperor did not do things the old-fashioned way, I should note. Every Primarch was different, though we only know of 18. 2 Primarchs and their own Astartes legions are missing, and we have basically nothing to work with when it comes to why. We just don't know. Once again, welcome to Warhammer 40k, with the Ambiguity Special. However, the 18 Primarchs we do know of are Lionel Johnson, Fulgrim, Perturabo, Jagatai Khan, Lehman Russ, Rogodorn, Conrad Kurz, Sanguinius, Ferrus Manus, Angron, Rubu Gilliman, Mortarion, Magnus the Red, Horus, Lorgar, Corvus Corax, and, yeah, that's all of them. These 18... Wait, is it all of them? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Who am I missing? Who am I... Wait. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Fuck, I missed 2. You know what? You know what? We're just gonna continue with the video, okay? This isn't about the Primarchs, alright? Alright? Ignore my goof. Ignore my goof. These 18 Primarchs would lead their... Oh god, everyone's gonna be calling me out for that. These 18 Primarchs would lead their Astartes, who were made using their own genes, across the galaxy on a crusade. At least that was the plan, as they were scattered thanks to the Chaos Gods not wanting the anathema to grow in power. So let's talk for a moment about the Emperor, Primarchs, and his motives. Firstly, why did the Emperor wait until humanity was at its weakest to emerge in the spotlight? Why not lead the human race at its height, when nobody could have rivaled it? Why not correct our path before our downfall? For someone who wants to create a galaxy-spanning empire unparalleled and unmatched in power, it is kind of counterintuitive to allow everything to just fall apart and start from the ground up. Well, here's where we need to ask the hard-to-swallow questions with potential answers that may even be more morbid. What does the Emperor want for humanity? Does he want humanity in the state it's in now? As in, is the humanity of the time something he would want to have happen? What if he wants to take our species and alter it to become something that is entirely a far cry of what you and I would consider to be a regular human? For that matter, we have to wonder if anyone would actually listen to the Emperor back then, during the Dark Age of Technology. I mean, truly listen. It is possible that the Emperor simply waited until the Age of Strife because there was just no conceivable way anyone could have resisted him. Here's where I stand. It is not a coincidence that he opted to take control when humanity had no capacity to choose what it wanted for itself, when our ability to resist would have been greatly diminished. And I should note that there was resistance, plenty of resistance, from Terra to the edge of the Great Crusade, but all of that resistance was not even close to a fraction of what would be required to stop the Emperor and his Imperium from seizing control of the galaxy. Because the Emperor's vision of a single secular government under him, acting as an old machine with little true freedoms to not mix with many, well, this is what makes me question the Emperor more than anything. Because it appears as if he deliberately allowed calamity after calamity after calamity after calamity to occur. Billions upon billions, trillions even, died, and the Emperor did nothing to intervene. He simply waited until any resistance to him would be so minuscule that he would have little issue seizing power. To top that off, he was brutal in stamping out the fires of freedom, bludgeoning and hacking obedience into those beneath him. Oftentimes, literally, he stamped out cultural norms, restricted liberties, dismantled the ideas of faith, and for all intents and purposes, he became a murderous tyrant. We often like to view the Emperor in a warmer, more positive light because he tends to be on the side of the protagonist in a Warhammer story, but the truth is that a protagonist doesn't have to be a good guy. A protagonist doesn't have to be a hero, and the Emperor certainly wasn't a hero. He doesn't value human life, he doesn't value emotion, he doesn't even value his own children, the Primarchs, whom he refers to as tools. Not to mention, if Malcador is to be believed, the Primarchs were always meant to turn on each other. It just happened earlier than anticipated thanks to the forces of chaos. Recently, with Robu Gilliman's return to the galaxy, the Primarch found himself disturbed at the sight of his father. And while we do not know what the Emperor said to him, we do know that he emerged shaken and aware of his status as a tool, aware that he's not seen as a son to his father. So to me, the Emperor doesn't care about humanity. I think he just cares about his agenda, which just so happens to necessitate human life existing in some capacity. So then the question is human dominance in the agenda? Or are we a tool to success, meant to be discarded like the Thunder Warriors? The Emperor is manipulative, known to skew things to his favor, and he is secretive. He doesn't share his true plans with anyone, and notably the times when those around him caught wind of his plans, they either turned against him or left. Just look at Erda in the book Saturnine, and for that matter, I have a theory. So bear in mind, this is just pure speculation, and there's little to nothing that properly backs this in lore. The Emperor was in fact trying to further humanity's psychic capabilities alongside developing the Webway, but I think he wanted to control it, manipulate it. Here's the thing about the Emperor, he likes control. Loose or unpredictable variables are something he just does his best to either avoid or stamp out. He keeps information to himself because, well, he doesn't want to share it with anyone that might blab it to someone else. He can't necessarily control what everyone else does, at least not yet. He keeps information to himself and lets others believe what he wants them to believe. This is something repeated by his most loyal confidant, Malcador the Sigillite, who oftentimes did the same. I think a notable story involves that of Malcador himself talking to an astropath that had been loyal to him for a long time. The story, by the way, comes from the First Lord of the Imperium audio drama. Highly recommend you listen to it. The woman in question is named Sybil, and she is dying. As such, Malcador is a little more liberal in how he speaks to her. This is not a story of a man comforting a dying friend. This is a tale of a guilty conscience confessing to an individual who will be dead by morning. What he says to her is not something that puts her at ease. It alarms and distresses Sybil to the point that she was sobbing, she was crying. Though a full and proper summary of this tale is best left to the YouTuber Luton09. Highly recommend giving First Lord of the Imperium a listen yourself, though it completely changes your views on 40k. Anyways, at the end, Malcador tells her to fall and that the Emperor will catch her, that he won't let go. By morning, Sybil is dead, and Malcador admits to himself that he lied, to spare her sorrow, that it broke his heart. When he says he lied, his lie? It was that the Emperor would catch her, because the Emperor won't catch her. And Sybil is effectively going to hell. She's going to hell. She's going to the warp. This story concludes with the Malcador angrily yelling at an Imperial eagle, likely meant to represent the Emperor. You promised me it wouldn't be like this. I lied to them to spare their sorrow, even as I envy their mortality. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. What is key in this conversation, however, is what it implied, that the Horus Heresy, a conflict in which the Emperor's sons turned against one another and himself, was always meant to happen. Outside factors, that being Tzeentch, Slaanesh, Nurgle, and Khorne, simply altered the plan. And while there is a debate as to whether or not Malcador is being fully accurate or truthful in his story, I don't see any reason as to why he would lie. Sybil was dying. Sybil would have no opportunity to tell anyone of what she saw or heard. What this story implies is that the Emperor has been deliberately manipulating and stoking the fires within his sons, that they are tools, and the heresy was a scheduled event meant to happen, that the billions of lives lost were a plan. But the plan went wrong thanks to the ruinous powers, and billions more are dying than what was planned. In conclusion, Everyone and everything is a tool, a means to an end. Contrary to Malcador's claims that the Imperium was meant for the common man and not the post-human, I have to ask, is it the common man of that time? Or is it for the common man of the Imperium's future? Thank you for watching. I will see you in the cosmos, friends.